Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here at Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes. I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, here at Bulletproof Selling, we believe above all else that hope is not a sales strategy. It didn't work on the battlefield, and it sure does not work in a sales office or when you're on site meeting with clients. So we are here each and every week, sometimes multiple times a week, to bring you the best in sales systems, the things that help you remove hope from what you're doing. And through the course of the last year and a half, 2 years that we've been doing this show, we've been able to interview Hall of Fame speakers, best-selling authors, people that are out there in the field managing sales teams, and those that are on the cutting edge of research in figuring out what is it that makes salespeople and sales leaders more effective than their competitors. And so my commitment to you is that out of each and every one of these shows, we build a sales system with our guests that you can immediately pick up and use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. And so something that I always find interesting when we get into the field of sales, because I've been able to meet thousands of salespeople since I started coaching sales teams, hundreds of sales leaders, and I find that the ones that are really out there succeeding, the ones that are out there making it happen, the ones that are out there managing great pipeline, making sure that their people are doing what they need to do, they never rest with what they know. They're always out there seeking new information. They're studying things from what other salespeople are doing to psychology, to neuroscience, to research journals. They are insatiable when it comes to gathering the things that they need to help themselves, their teams, and their peers to be more successful. And that's why when I get to interview someone who has an academic background, often I think to myself, well, this is going to be a dry conversation because I don't know about you guys, but I went through plenty of university classes where the teachers hadn't been in the industry for decades. And when they were in the industry, they went right from being a student to being a professor. And so when I am approached by somebody that says, Sean, I have someone that's at a university that you need to interview on your show, I take that with a grain of salt. But in this case, today's guest was actually a sales leader in a very large organization. And now he takes what he learned and moves it into the minds of people that are going into the field of sales, that are going into management, that are going into leadership. And so I am very excited to be having a conversation today with, all the way from Toronto, Canada, Sanjay Dhebar. Sanjay, welcome to Bulletproof Selling.
Yeah, great to be here. Excited, Blake.
So, Sean, you're actually talking to Blake, my assistant.
Right.
So, Sean Rhodes here. No worries, man. Because
Right.
believe it or not, Blake is so efficient that I want to get him on the show to run it so that I can go and just listen and study sales. So, no problem there. But for our guests that weren't able to read your bio, because you have a fascinating transition from being in the industry to being what you're doing today, talk to us a little bit about your background, how you moved from being a sales leader in a large organization to now teaching sales.
Yeah, Sean, great question. And, I love telling the story around the expectations. We adjust to trends with our customers for sales. Why are we not doing that in academia? And so I was in industry, grew up a career, in healthcare and consumer packaged goods, doing different things, worked in marketing, worked in sales and sales leadership. And I was teaching part-time. And while I was teaching part-time, what I realized was that people actually enjoyed my communication, my teachings, my thoughts, because I was bringing it directly from the front line or from my team. And so that practitioner experts, industry experience is what academia wanted. Students are demanding because they want to start working tomorrow. They're not like my generation waiting years to move up and do different things. That was when I realized I should be doing this more actively, both in academia and then consulting, supporting organization success.
I love it. So that's really lines up well with what we saw in the military as well. They're taking 18-year-olds, and while the 18-year-olds probably wouldn't have preferred to be thrown into combat situations quickly, that was what the job required. And so we didn't have years to prepare them. We had a short amount of time to get them the lessons they needed over everything that we had been learning across hundreds of years of combat so that they could be successful on the battlefield. Now, I see salespeople, to your point, that are really dedicated to success, same way. Whether they're going through school to get the expertise and the knowledge that they learn, or whether they're out there on the front lines, these folks, the ones that are successful, are dedicated to picking it up quickly and using it. So I'm curious to see then, what do you find the differences? Because you were able to manage salespeople that were fresh off the street, that you had to train up from not knowing much about sales to being successful account reps. And now you're in the university setting where you're taking people that have a little bit more time to get training. What do you see the difference in the mindset of those two types of people, if any?
Sure. So first of all, being on the show, I'm a fan, Sean, having a chat on all your podcasts, and your enthusiasm and passion for sales is infectious. And so what I do love in Canada, we don't have as much when I was trying to hire people in industry, or when I work with companies on hiring, hire former athletes. And the reason is that discipline, which you constantly talk about, that's transferable from the front lines of being part of the military to into sales. That politeness, that punctuality, the basic stuff around discipline to do your work, because you're home. Before the pandemic, working from home was a foreign concept, not for salespeople. And so that transferable, which now it comes back to your question on academia, is how do you incorporate? We can give you sales methodology. I can tell you strategy and different things, which we'll talk about. But how do you get the discipline to commit to your customers, to work autonomously, and the most importantly, communicate effectively where they actually trust you? Because it's not about selling, it's about building trust.
That's amazing. So with the types of people that you saw then, salespeople coming in off the street and university students, is there any difference in mindset for how they're approaching sales? Are they more willing to try anything in the university because they're not out there held to an activity quota? Or is it's different concepts? Because I've never been in either of those situations. That's why I asked. I've definitely been on the front line of not knowing what I was doing in sales, thrown into the deep end of the pool. I'm really curious going through the university setting to learn sales, because there's plenty of online courses to learn sales, but you're actually in a university teaching sales and marketing. So I'm just curious about the difference you've seen in the students that you have versus the salespeople that you had to manage earlier in your career.
Yeah. And so, Sean, that transition is great from the discipline part to the understanding, comprehending and teaching. So I'm teaching it in, generally graduate students, MBA students. And the university I teach at, it's called Schulich School of Business in Toronto, and it's got a partnership with Northwestern's. So your American audience can really appreciate the magnitude and respect of an institution. So fine, we have high performers, high academic, high achievers in this program because of how difficult it is to get into. But then how do you transfer that to sales? And the answer to the question is simple: confidence. And this isn't about individual, but confidence around, how can you be a solo act? Right now in North America, we're struggling to get athletes that are willing to compete in individual sports, because obviously the intensity and pressure is much more higher than team sports. Both have transferable skills. But so what I'm telling you is that, we're doing role play sessions, or, when you got to get up there, it's like anxiety kicks in and that lack of confidence. They know what to say, it just doesn't come out. And that's what I think the big difference is between someone who's, a practitioner working in the field and may not have a high level of education, would probably never get in this program, but has a higher level of confidence, missing maybe sometimes in academia.
And so I'm curious then, and how do you systemize, or I'm going to rephrase my question here, because I know this is going to be me. This is going to be powerful. Where have you seen salespeople rely on hope more than they should in attempting to be individual performers? Because to your point, there's a lot of salespeople out there that are relatively on their own. They're working from home. They're not going in to meet with their teams, or they're running their own businesses. They are the sales team in essence. And I know a lot of leaders often end up in this position as well, where I'm the chief sales officer, but I'm also carrying the hat of CIO and CFO and a whole bunch of other C-level positions in a small company. So where do you see salespeople relying on hope more than they should in academia or in the field in being an individual performer? Is it not practicing? Is it not doing those dry runs? Is it not coaching themselves? Where do you see that falling?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm excited to answer this question, because I know this is kind of the common ask that you have to your guest. And so hope generally is something that a lot of us depended on, even when I was in sales, because I'm like, I got a great relationship. And so that dependence on relationship. And I remember interviewing people all across Canada from different provinces, say, why should I hire you? And they say, because I have great relationships. And I'm like, you don't have any here. I'm bringing you to a new organization, new business, new sector. You have no relationship. So you're going to be unsuccessful for 6 months. So that's when I think that people rely on hope if they think the relationships makes them successful. What has changed today for those there's core performers and there's star performers. Star performers basically are willing to be evaluated on the fact that they're a thought leader, subject matter expert, and actually will say to you, not ask you what's keeping you up at night. We'll actually say to you, here's what should be keeping you up at night. And that fortitude and those insights that they share means they're less relying on relationship, less relying on hope, but actually are telling them, this is the direction. And if you don't do this, this is the risk you take. And that's strategy 101. And when I see people participating in a discussion like that, there's no chance of them being dependent on hope. They're actually showing accountability and intelligence mixed in with strategy.
So what is the difference then between, because what I hear you saying is if I have a crystal ball as a salesperson and I can predict the future for my prospects, for my customer base, obviously they're going to want to know what I have. They're going to want to know what I see that they don't, but we don't have crystal balls. So I'm curious on how a salesperson can even begin to wrap their head around the problems that their prospects don't even see coming.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this is where I think one part of academia is pretty good is, research and data, access to data. Now, when I worked in marketing, I was overwhelmed with data. I actually tell, graduate students who say, I want to go work in marketing. I'm like, how financially literate are you? And how
Right.
good is analysis? Because the data job is huge. Great. We have access to great data, real-time data, but how do you decipher determined insights? Same thing with salespeople. How does marketing feed you a good amount of data that when you go in there and you look at your CM system, you are able to pull out what best sets you for success and are agile based on what data you obtain in real time during interaction with your customer.
So let's talk then about a sales system that would help salespeople filter the data so that they can show up in a prospect conversation by saying, here are the things that should be keeping you up at night because I've done the research. Now, when we do research, I mean, you could talk about any industry. You could go through a PhD program in just the things that are going to affect the pharmaceutical industry in the next 5 years. There's that much data out there, or any industry for that matter. So we have to filter down the data to just the things that are going to really get our prospects' interests. So if we're reaching out cold or for those warm calls or re-engaging in a conversation with somebody we haven't talked to since before the pandemic, why should they give us time? Because we're showing up with what they should be worried about, what should be keeping them up at night. That means we need to filter down through a lot of data. So let's build a sales system around this, Sanjay. This is going to be something that I think from an academic perspective, you can give people a lot of insight into how to do good research, and all of the paths you've seen students take were just a waste of time. So we talk about sales systems, same acronym that we went through in the military. These things have to be ready to roll at any time because I don't know when a prospect's going to call or when I need to start researching an industry until I identify that's the account that I want to chase. It has to be repeatable. I need to be able to improve it, and I have to be able to measure it. So we use this acronym TRIM to do this, to systems build. And like you said, your star performers are the ones that are doing great research, but they can consistently leverage that research. This is a way that we're going to show salespeople how to consistently do great research and leverage it. And we don't have an MBA program. I know a lot of salespeople would love to go through your program, but we're going to try to get this done in the next couple of minutes. So just the highlights, and then definitely people will get access to you later. So with the trigger element in this, when do I need to trigger my research on a prospect? Is this when I've identified an ideal prospect profile, when I'm getting into an industry, when I'm, just getting ready to pick up the phone? When should I be really triggering a system that shows me how to identify what research is going to be valuable?
Yeah. I got 3 short answers. Probably the one to answer your question, Sean. First is, define your customers. Are they a skeptic? Skeptics are difficult, but they're engaged, right? Is your customer kind of a guide? Someone who wants you to walk through the kind of different points of your, what you're pitching them. And then you have someone, so you have a guide, and then you have someone who, wants to be a driver, a teacher. So it means that you feed them all the information, they take the notes, and then they take it. So when you take these type of profiles of individuals, you want to make sure your research, if you're going to share it, is credible. So it's fine. So let's just say I love Gartner Research. We're remiss not to suggest Gartner Research is a great, credible source of information. Once you break it down, you start sharing it. Now, Sean, the challenge is with salespeople is we talk too much. That's why I love introverted people for sales, because they listen. Unbelievable. I don't want to go off topic about the soft skills, but to answer your question is when you're presenting that data, especially with your formula about structure, is you got to know when to stop. Because if you keep feeding them, people start developing certain biases. They may develop an anchor bias because they're tired of hearing too much, or they may do recency bias based on what the last thing they heard because they can't keep with what you're saying. So it's one thing to share, be quality information versus quantity information, and have credible resources.
So let's talk about gathering that quality information then. This is when we move into kind of the repeatable part of this system. So the 4 or 5 steps that might have a bunch of steps underneath them, but the 4 or 5 big strategies that I need to be engaging in as a salesperson to make sure that I'm gathering the research that will allow me to tell my prospects, here's what should be keeping you up at night, and what is your plan for dealing with that? What are the 4 or 5 things that I need to look at in any industry to identify what that statement is?
Yeah. Depending on the sector you're working in, there could be state or federal or municipal government changes that will affect regulation that could affect the outcome of them, the amount they buy from you or the number of orders they make from you or the pricing. So you got to take that into consideration. We never think about that often enough, which gets into competitive analysis. So it's one thing to know about your competitors doing, and I can't tell you, it drives me nuts when sales folks talk negative about their competitors. I always say it's okay, talk about the marketplace, talk about the industry, and talk about what others are doing, but never name drop and put them down. It's a turnoff. It's just a turnoff, especially if that individual maybe is presently using them. So we talk about competitive analysis, market analysis. What can market conditions are changing? One thing we learned about COVID is we don't have to wait a year for changes. We could wait a week, a month, and a quarter. So constantly understand the trend that's happening. So, we have regulatory, we have competitive intelligence, we have market changes, what's happening. But then there's that social selling, right? What part of social media are you utilizing to gather intelligence about the individual, about that organization? Is there reputational issues that you can help them support by you being the buyer that they buy from? So, using LinkedIn as a powerful tool, or using other components that people utilize to get an understanding, to gather information. But how do you package it all together?
That's the question. Yeah, that's the question. So when we talk about packaging, then there's a lot of different ways that we can communicate, of course, and it's probably more and more every single day as new technologies come out. But as I think about standard sales practices, picking up the phone to drive that conversation, sending an email, sending a direct message on LinkedIn, what do you recommend as a good opening? Now we're getting, kind of tactical here, but as a good opening to be able to open the conversation to, here's what you should be worried about. Because if I start pumping out messages, Sanjay, for this is what should be keeping you up at night, how are you dealing with it? That might not land as well as I want because I haven't established any trusting relationship. They don't know if the data I'm giving them is good or not. So what do you recommend a salesperson begin to do to open that conversation so that they can deliver in 5 minutes or in 5 messages later? Here's what should be keeping you up at night. How do I begin to build the trust to get to that point?
Sure. Sean, the easy answer to that is be inquisitive. Constantly ask questions. If you've prepared and you've done all this research and you know everything, great. So you're prepared. Maybe you talk to other people in the organization, cross-functional teams. So internally, you know what you can offer or what you can negotiate. Now, ask questions. If you commit to asking 5 questions, and there could be sub questions between that, you're gathering more information that either gives you things you didn't know, items you didn't know, or validates what you're thinking. Then you attack. And I don't mean to use the word, in a negative way, but meaning now you make your suggestions. We as salespeople just like to take one deep breath and just let it rip. But we don't have enough information, so we customize it. And that's that agility component that everyone's pushing in sales is, fine, you have an approach, you're confident, you communicate, subject matter expert, but are you agile based on what you learn in real time from that? The only way to uncover that is by asking many questions as you possibly can.
I love it. So learn more about that person so that whatever data you're bringing to the table can be really customized to their challenges, to where you see them already moving so that you can be a step ahead, kind of recreating a crystal ball in an ethical way and in a way that provides value. I love that. So we've got the trigger element, making it repeatable. And the I in this acronym TRIM, because we're trimming hope away from a sales strategy here, is improvable. So we noticed on the battlefield that if we weren't constantly updating what we were doing, our opponent would quickly figure it out, or the environment would, adapt around us. We can't fight the same way in a sandstorm as we do in sunny weather. We have to alter our systems and our tactics. So if we were going to improve what we're already talking about doing and how we gather data and how we separate the wheat from the chaff and how we present that to a prospect, what are some things that I could be doing to improve that as a salesperson? What do I need to be paying attention to so I know that this system is getting better and keeping up with in the environment or the market changes that are happening?
Yeah. One thing I struggle with as a salesperson, so if I complement your TRIM model to the question you're asking now, was the soft skills. So even though I wanted to, customize and be agile, are you truly listening, right? And I've heard you talked about this lots, is if you're not listening, how do you really gather? And I don't mean listening like because you're not talking, actually absorbing what's being said by your customer. So there's an equation there to complement your TRIM models. First, you ask your question, then you shut up and listen. And you give those, commitment to facial nods, those social attributes to show that you're engaged. Then you reflect in your head what's being told to you to then understand the best way to respond. And so listen, reflection, and then respond. That combination of soft skills is what's greatly missing from some salespeople. And that's because the dialogue is 80-20. They feel they need to talk for 80% of the time and listen for 20. It should be 50-50 at best, based on the personality. And when you have that dialogue, you're constantly learning more, and your customer's willing to share if you listen, reflect, and respond.
And I'd be willing to bet that with asking great questions over the course of even a few conversations, not even half a dozen, but just a few, 2 or 3 or 4, you would begin to notice trends in the concerns of the people that you're speaking with, especially if you're focusing on a single industry or a single market segment. And that would, as you said, allow you to then do, all right, I'm noticing a trend there. Maybe I should do research in that area. Because if I'm noticing everybody's concerned with the new regulation coming out and I don't know enough about it, or I don't know enough to suggest some solutions, that's the first thing that I need to do to really do good research to provide value. Whether these people end up doing business or not with me, if I can get them a step ahead or prevent them from getting fined or going to jail. I'll give you an example that I know applies to Canada as much as the US right now. One of my clients is the cannabis industry, and they're really concerned with running afoul of the law here in the United States. They can't do business with a lot of banks. So if they're not ahead of what's going on with regulatory changes, not only could they find themselves in trouble, but their customers as well. So I love the idea of noticing trends, which you've been mentioning that multiple times throughout our conversation. So if we've got the trigger element, making it repeatable, making it improvable, now let's talk about the M in trim, which is making this thing measurable. Because if I'm taking the time as a salesperson to do great research and then to apply it and listen more, my conversations are getting longer. I'm investing more time in research. I'm investing more time on the phone because I'm not just driving on the phone now. I'm actually taking a step back, relaxing a little bit, and listening. All of that involves more time, the one resource I can't get back. How do I measure the success of this, how I conduct research, and how I apply it to make sure that this system's worth continuing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, learn the skill. That's one part. And it's not a complicated skill around research and good sources. That's when you leverage marketing. They've got to be your partner in this task because that's what they do all year. And we get this tug of war between sales and marketing, Sean, constantly. But in the end, they're a resource, and they have to utilize them. Feed them instead of them telling you what you tell them. This is what I'm seeing. Can you do some research? Can you make me understand? Let's have a discussion. How can I participate in this process? Reflecting this regional dynamics versus your big picture of national look. So all those type of things come in to partner with marketing to understand their skill set or in market research, or their agencies they use to help support that, and then the information they get. So once you got the information, reviewing it, what stands out? Because it's great to get it, but it's the insights that stand out. So I think it's really important that by working with marketing, break down the wall that happens between sales and marketing, utilize them for your benefit. Because in the end, it's a win-win. They have the information, they'll feed it to you. They have good content, they have good feedback, they have good data that you can then decipher and say, this is how it can help me in my territory or my region in real time. And then you go through your process.
Mm-hmm. And to notice the things that you're seeing on the front lines with your prospects to feed that back into marketing as well. And I don't know about you, Sanjay, the most integrated marketing and sales teams I've ever witnessed were the ones that had open lines of communication, where the sales team wanted to know what the marketing team was discovering in the research, and the marketing team needed to know what the sales team was hearing from their prospects, from their customers, so that they could do better research, more focused research, more value-driven research. So that's definitely something that can happen as a cross-channel communication. So with this trigger, repeatable, improvable, and measurable, now we've given salespeople a way to identify where they need to be doing their research, separating the wheat from the chaff. So they're not trying to read the whole Encyclopedia Britannica on this. They're really identifying, here are the things that my customers and prospects really need to know, so that when I show up, I can help guide them to success and avoid the pitfalls that I see coming through the research, through the work that I'm doing. Because my customers are busy running their businesses, doing what they do. It's my job as a salesperson to show up with additional value and help them navigate those changes. So I love this system that any salesperson can use, especially the ones that have a great marketing team. So Sanjay, with everything you've got going on, I'd love to get people deeper into your world. Where can they find you on social media? How do they learn about what you're doing at your university? How do they, just get all of the IP that you've built over the course of your lifetime?
Yeah. So Sean, first of all, if I may add a sense of humor for people of our vintage of age, I wonder if centennials, those born after 2000, know what the Encyclopedia Britannica is.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, I might have dated myself. That's what we used to call Google.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, right? Which you can't put on a bookshelf, sadly.
No.
As far as getting known to me, first of all, like what a great opportunity it is to interact with you, Sean. You're such a thought expert when it comes to specific areas, and you have models that people can apply. And how I can complement that, I'd love to support you. My company's called Leonnova, Leonnova, Leonnova 21 on Instagram, and then Leonnova on LinkedIn. And truthfully, I am blessed in what I get to do, which I know you are as well, Sean. So anyone who reaches out to me and has got a question or wants to have a quick chat, I'm accessible to you. I am very expensive to work with, but those who are asking for help that are individuals, I'm always available to you.
I love that. So make sure to find Sanjay on LinkedIn. We'll definitely be linking his profile through these posts. So if you came to us through anywhere on social media, you'll find that. Of course, through the podcast as well. Make sure that you're checking this guy out. He's smart. And of course, if you have the opportunity to connect with someone that has decades of experience in not only running a sales organization, but in teaching this, that's an offer that you shouldn't pass up, because whatever question you have, I guarantee you Sanjay can help you at least get in the right direction. So for, of course, all of us here at Bulletproof Selling, we definitely want to make sure that you're following us on LinkedIn. Make sure you're getting this channel on YouTube, where all of these archived conversations are housed. And of course, if you're listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found. And of course, for more sales systems, just like the one that you heard Sanjay and I build today, make sure you're checking those out over at bulletproofselling.us. Well, Sanjay, it's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside you. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.